Moscow, May 9, 2026. The most recognizable city in Russia, home to 12 million people. The seat of one of the most powerful governments on earth. The city that has stood for 8 centuries. And tonight, its phones don't work. Not because of a technical failure, not because of a natural disaster, because Vladimir Putin's government shut them off. All mobile internet access, all text messaging services, across the entire Russian capital, switched off, by order of Russia's Ministry of Digital Development, Communications and Mass Media. On the most important day in Russia's political calendar, Putin's government shut the phones off in Moscow to protect a parade. That sentence, read it again slowly, contains the entire story of what has happened to Russia's war in Ukraine. A government so afraid of what might fly over its capital city on its most sacred national holiday that it disabled its own citizens' ability to communicate. A military so concerned about enemy drones that it deployed hundreds of air defense systems to protect a parade that has no military hardware left to display. A parade, without tanks, without missiles, without armored vehicles, surrounded by the most elaborate security apparatus ever assembled for a peacetime celebration, because it isn't really a peacetime celebration anymore. This is Moscow on Victory Day 2026. This is what winning looks like in Russia. Welcome back. Today we are going inside the military lockdown that turned Russia's greatest annual celebration into something that looks more like a siege. Let's get into it. Let's be precise about what military lockdown actually means in practice, because the phrase is striking, but the specific measures are even more striking than the phrase. Here is what Russia implemented in Moscow for Victory Day 2026. Mobile internet and text messaging, completely shut down. Russia's Ministry of Digital Development, Communications and Mass Media officially ordered all mobile internet access and text messaging services suspended in Moscow on May 9th. State media reported this on May 7th, giving Muscovites 2 days' notice that their phones would be reduced to making voice calls only. This is not a minor inconvenience. In a modern city of 12 million people, mobile internet is how people navigate, communicate, work, access news, order food, contact emergency services, and manage their daily lives. Shutting it off across an entire capital city is an extraordinary step, one that even authoritarian governments deploy sparingly because it generates enormous domestic resentment. Why did Russia do it? The official explanation was security, a vague term. The actual reason, confirmed by every security analyst who commented on the measure, is specific. Ukrainian drone operators use mobile internet connectivity and GPS correction signals to improve the accuracy of their drone guidance systems. By shutting down mobile internet in Moscow, Russia was trying to degrade Ukrainian drone navigation accuracy in the capital's airspace. Russia blocked its own citizens' internet to make Ukrainian drones less accurate over Moscow. Hundreds of air defense systems deployed to Moscow. Russian telegram channels, many of them pro-military with sources inside the Russian defense establishment, reported that hundreds of air defense systems had been transferred to Moscow in the days before Victory Day. Not dozens, hundreds. This represents an extraordinary reallocation of military assets. Air defense systems that would normally be defending Russian cities, military bases, oil refineries, and border regions from Ukrainian attack were pulled from those positions and concentrated in Moscow. For the parade, the systems reportedly deployed included Pantsir S short-range systems, Buk medium-range systems, and S-400 long-range systems, the full spectrum of Russia's layered air defense architecture, converging on the Russian capital for a single day. Security perimeter expanded to unprecedented scale. According to Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, preparations for the parade were taking place in a mode more similar to a military lockdown than a celebration. The intelligence service described communication blackouts across Moscow for the entire week preceding the parade. Russian authorities established security cordons around Red Square and key parade routes at distances not previously seen in peacetime. Traffic restrictions, access control points, ID verification for anyone approaching the parade area. The kind of security apparatus that Russia usually deploys for military operations, deployed for a national holiday. drone interceptions the night before, and then, as if to confirm that every one of these extraordinary measures was justified, Russia's own defense ministry reported that it had shot down 347 Ukrainian drones the night before the parade. Over 20 Russian regions, including Moscow. Russia's Mayor Sobyanin confirmed that air defenses engaged Ukrainian drones targeting the capital. 347 drones, the night before the parade, while Moscow's internet was already being prepared for shutdown. Zelensky's Foreign Intelligence Service described the atmosphere with a single phrase that has since been quoted around the world. More similar to a military lockdown than a celebration. The internet shutdown and the hundreds of air defense systems are the security response to Ukraine's drone capability. But there is a second dimension to Moscow's Victory Day 2026 that tells a different, equally devastating story. The tanks are gone. For the first time since 2007, 19 years, Russia's Victory Day parade will proceed without heavy military equipment. No tanks, no armored fighting vehicles, no self-propelled artillery, no missile systems on their massive transporter erectors. The hardware that has been the central visual element of the parade, the image that Russia projects to its own people and to the world every May 9th, is absent. Russia's official explanation is the operational situation. The hardware is needed at the front. But let's be honest about what operational situation means in May 2026. Russia has been losing tanks at a catastrophic rate since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. The Oryx open-source intelligence project, which tracks Russian equipment losses using photographic evidence, has documented the destruction of over 3,500 Russian tanks since the war began. Over 4,000 armored fighting vehicles, hundreds of artillery systems. These losses cannot be fully replaced. Russian tank production has ramped up, but not fast enough to compensate for the rate of destruction on the Ukrainian battlefield. Soviet-era stockpiles that military planners relied on for reserve capacity are being drawn down. The empty parade route where the tanks should be is not just a logistical adjustment. It is a military confession. A public acknowledgement, made in the most visible possible way, that Russia's armored forces have been consumed by the war to a degree that the Kremlin cannot disguise even for a single day. And there is a second reason for the absence of tanks that Russia's officials have been less explicit about, but that Zelensky identified precisely. They fear drones may buzz over Red Square, Zelensky said in Yerevan on May 4th. This is telling. It shows they are not strong now. A Ukrainian drone striking a Russian T-90 tank rolling across Red Square on live Russian television on May 9th would be the most devastating single image of the entire war. More damaging than any battlefield defeat. More politically damaging than any sanction. A direct, visual, irrefutable demonstration that Russia cannot protect its own symbols of power in its own capital on its own most sacred day. Russia's security services calculated the risk and decided the hardware stays home. Not just because it's needed at the front, but because bringing it to Moscow creates a target of incalculable political value. The lockdown and the absent tanks are two halves of the same confession. Ukraine's military capability has reached into the heart of Russia in a way that changes everything about how Russia can perform its identity. To understand the full weight of what is happening in Moscow on May 9th, 2026, you need to understand what Victory Day was supposed to be, and what Putin made it into over 26 years. May 9th commemorates the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. The signing of Germany's surrender, due to time zones, occurred on May 9th, Moscow time, which is why Russia celebrates a day later than the rest of Europe. The human cost of that war was staggering. Between 26 and 27 million Soviet citizens died. For Russian and Ukrainian families, the sacrifice was personal and profound. Grandparents who did not come home, cities that were reduced to rubble, a generation that was largely destroyed. That history is real. That grief is real. The sacrifice deserves to be remembered. But here is what Putin did with that history over 26 years. He turned Victory Day from solemn commemoration into political theater. The Soviet Union held only 4 Victory Day parades in the entire period between 1945 and 1991. The event was observed, but not militarized. The massive annual parade that the world now associates with May 9th is Putin's creation, a 21st century phenomenon specifically designed to serve his political purposes. Putin turned Victory Day into the annual renewal of his legitimacy. The parade is where Putin tells Russians, "We are the heirs of the greatest victory in human history. We are a military superpower. We cannot be challenged. Our strength is unquestionable. The proof stands before you on Red Square." Every year the tanks rolled. Every year the missiles were displayed. Every year foreign leaders were invited to sit in the VIP section and validate Russia's claim to great power status. Every year, Putin stood on the reviewing platform and surveyed it all, the ultimate performance of Russian strength. And now, in 2026, in the 5th year of the war he launched, look at what that performance has become. The tanks are home. The missiles are elsewhere. The armored vehicles are not coming. The internet is shut off. Hundreds of air defense systems ring the parade route. The preparations, according to Ukraine's intelligence service, resemble a military lockdown more than a celebration. 19 years ago, the parade had no tanks because Russia's military was rebuilding after the chaos of the 1990s. Today, the parade has no tanks because Russia's military has been consuming them at a rate of hundreds per month in a war that was supposed to last 3 days. The military lockdown is the physical manifestation of what the war has done to Russia's ability to perform its identity. The tanks are gone. The missiles are gone. The confidence is gone. What remains is a city fortified against the country it invaded, a security perimeter protecting a parade from the drones of the army that was supposed to have collapsed in 72 hours. This is not the Victory Day Putin built. This is the Victory Day the war in Ukraine has produced. The parade will proceed. Soldiers will march. Officers will salute. The Russian anthem will play. Putin will speak. But let's talk about who is marching and who isn't. The soldiers who march in the Victory Day parade are selected, rehearsed, and prepared months in advance. They are drawn from military academies, from garrison units, from the honor guard, from the parts of Russia's military establishment that are not deployed to the front lines. The soldiers who are not marching are the ones in the Donbass. In the Pokrovsk sector, where Ukrainian defenders stopped 26 Russian assault attempts in a single day earlier this month. In the Sumy region, where Russian forces are pushing against Ukrainian defensive lines in the north. In the areas around Kharkiv and Zaporizhia, where artillery barrages have been continuing without pause through every declared ceasefire. Those soldiers, the ones actually fighting the war, are not on Red Square today. They are in trenches and foxholes in armored vehicles. Some of them are in hospitals. Some of them are already dead. Russia has suffered approximately 1,334,000 personnel casualties since February 24, 2022. Killed and seriously wounded. More than 1 million people. Let that number sit for a moment alongside the image of the parade. More than 1 million casualties in 4 years and 3 months. And the Victory Day parade proceeds with no hardware, surrounded by air defense systems, in a city with its internet shut off. Ukraine's defense minister reported that Russia suffered 35,203 casualties in April 2026 alone. 1 month. That is over 1,000 people per day. Killed or seriously wounded, every single day. While Russia's government was planning the parade, while Putin was proposing ceasefires to Trump, while the Kremlin was issuing statements about the great Victory Day celebrations. The disconnect between the pageantry of Red Square and the reality of the Pokrovsk sector is the central obscenity of Russian wartime communication. The parade celebrates a victory from 81 years ago, while the current war produces 1,000 casualties per day. The soldiers who march are the ones who didn't go to Ukraine. The ones who did are not available for parades. And in Ukraine, where 40 million people are living through their 5th year of war, there is no parade. There is no celebration of military hardware. There are air raid sirens, bomb shelters, emergency services responding to missile strikes, families counting their dead. The contrast between Red Square and Ukraine on May 9, 2026, is the contrast between performance and reality, between what Russia needs its people to believe and what the war has actually produced. So what did the world see on May 9, 2026? It saw a parade. Soldiers in pressed uniforms marching in formation, officers with medals across their chests, the Russian anthem playing over loudspeakers, flags raised. A speech by Vladimir Putin invoking the sacrifice of the Soviet generation and the justness of Russia's current military campaign. It saw Fico sitting in the VIP section, Vucic, representatives from several Central Asian and African states. It saw an empty route where the tanks should have been. It saw a city where nobody's phone worked. It saw, in the days before, 347 Ukrainian drones intercepted over Russia. A luxury Moscow apartment building with damage on its upper floors. Mayor Sobyanin's confirmation that 14 drones had been intercepted over Moscow in a single 14-hour period. And it heard, 3 days earlier from Zelensky in his nightly address, 19 words that framed everything the world was watching. They want permission from Ukraine to hold their parade, so they can safely march onto the square for 1 hour once a year, and then go back to killing our people and waging war again. Those words were the lens through which the entire world watched the parade. Putin's speech about Russian strength and historical destiny, the soldiers marching in perfect formation, the fighter jets screaming overhead, the only military hardware present at the parade, safely airborne rather than on the ground where drones could find them. And underneath all of it, the absent tanks, the shut-down internet, the hundreds of air defense systems, the military lockdown that Zelensky's intelligence service described more accurately than any Russian official would dare. The world saw a performance. And thanks to Zelensky's 19 words, the world also saw what the performance was hiding. A country that launched this war believing it would take 3 days is now afraid to put its tanks in its own capital for 1 day. A military that was supposed to be the second most powerful in the world cannot guarantee the safety of its own parade without shutting down an entire city's communication infrastructure. That is not victory. That is not strength. That is the picture of a war that has gone catastrophically wrong for the country that started it, dressed in pressed uniforms and photographed on Red Square for domestic consumption. The parade ends. The soldiers stand down. The mobile internet comes back on. Whenever Russia's Ministry of Digital Development decides to restore it, the hundreds of air defense systems that were concentrated in Moscow begin their redeployment to the positions they were pulled from, and the war resumes. That is Zelensky's point. That has always been his point. Russia wanted 1 hour of quiet for its parade, not a day, not a week, not a month. 1 hour. 60 minutes of silence, so the performance could proceed without the sound of Ukrainian drones in the background, and then back to the killing. Ukraine's ceasefire from May 6th onward was a genuine offer, not for an hour. Ukraine said, if Russia stops, we stop. If Russia demonstrates readiness for diplomacy, we follow diplomacy. There is no time limit on that offer. Ukraine is not asking for a pause timed to a specific holiday. Ukraine is asking for the killing to actually stop. Russia's response to that offer was 1,820 violations in 10 hours. A kindergarten in Bielopilya, 347 Ukrainian drones in return, and then a parade. After the parade, the fundamental situation has not changed. Russia still holds approximately 19% of Ukrainian territory. Ukraine still controls the rest. The front lines are largely static, barely moving in either direction for months. The ceasefire diplomacy has produced no progress. The negotiations through Pakistani intermediaries have not broken the fundamental deadlock. Summer is coming. Zelensky called it the decisive moment, when Putin must choose between expanding the war and moving to diplomacy. The parade is over. The choice remains. And the lockdown, the absent tanks, the shut-down phones, the hundreds of air defense systems deployed for a parade, is the most honest public statement Russia has made about the state of this war. It is not winning. It is surviving. No tanks, no missiles, no internet. Hundreds of air defense systems protecting a parade from the country Russia invaded. A military lockdown, Not of a combat zone, but of Red Square. Not of a frontline city, but of Moscow. This is Victory Day 2026. This is what the war in Ukraine has done to Russia's ability to perform its own identity. And somewhere, in a nightly address to his nation, in front of 40 million people who have been living through this for more than 4 years, Volodymyr Zelensky looked at all of it and said the only thing that needed to be said. They cannot afford military equipment, and they fear drones may buzz over Red Square. This is telling. It shows they are not strong now. Share this video, subscribe, hit like. The war continues after the parade, and we'll be covering every development as it happens. See you there.